the key point I'm making here is this has been a disaster for this region. And people are understandably frightened and concerned about what the next few months and the next few years may hold. I have absolutely confidence about the resilience of this area long term, but if we can make sure that BP is doing the right thing on the front end, it's going to make it an awful lot easier for us to fully recover on the back end. And by the way, it may end up being cheaper for BP. And so Thad, who's interacting with BP on a regular basis, I think is emphasizing this. My administration is emphasizing it. I want them to hear directly from me, and I want the public to hear from me. They need to make sure that they are following through on these claims in an expeditious, fair way. And if they're not, then we are going to stay on them about it. We've already submitted one bill, and they haven't said that they're not paying it, so I don't want to anticipate problems, but we are already starting to see at the local level folks experiencing problems. And we don't want those problems to build up. We want to nip that at the bud right now. And the fact that BP could pay a $10.5 billion dividend payment is indicative of how much money these folks have been making. And given the fact that they didn't fully account for the risks, I don't want somebody else bearing the costs of those risks that they took. I want to make sure that they're paying for it. All right? Last point I wanted to make is we did talk about what the environmental quality is down here right now. Lisa Jackson has been down here all week, and she went all across the country, or all across the state of Louisiana. She's going to be monitoring what's going on in Alabama and Florida as well. So far, the air quality, water quality is continually being tested. It doesn't seem to be much elevated above normal levels. But I want to emphasize something that she just told us, and that is people who are on site involved in cleanup, they have to be mindful of the fact that we're dealing with toxins here. This could be, this could make people very sick if they're not careful. They've got to get the appropriate training. They need the appropriate equipment. If they get sick, we now have health centers that are stationed at each of these points. Lisa, you want to talk about that briefly?
Yes, sir. We have health and safety officers and stations at each muster point. So if someone does come back in and feel in any way that they've been exposed, or even if they just don't feel well, the first thing to do is to report it, sir, so that we have a record of it, we can track it down, and we can ensure that they're not in any way penalized for reporting and making sure that they put their health and the health of their family first.
Okay. Again, I want to just emphasize everybody down here, every local official, every state official is working. There are still going to be glitches in the response. There's still going to be arguments and disagreements between local and state and federal, between everybody in BP, between states and states in terms of how we're allocating some of these resources. But I think that Thad Allen has committed to me and the people of the Gulf that we're going to cut through any bureaucratic red tape, any problems that we've got, and we will fix problems that have been identified. And that was the commitment I made last week. Some of the problems have been fixed. Some new ones have resurfaced. We'll fix those too, and we'll keep on coming back until we have dealt with an unprecedented crisis. But I'm very thankful to everybody for the constructive meeting and the constructive approach that I think everybody's taken in terms of solving this problem. All right? Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, what did you say to the parish presidents about the difficulty, the economic difficulties from the drilling moratorium?
We had a conversation about that as well, and what I told them is very simple. When I made the decision to issue the moratorium, we knew that that would have an economic impact. But what I also knew is that there was no way that we can go about business as usual when we've discovered that companies like BP, who had provided assurances that they had fail-safe, backup, redundant systems, in fact, not only didn't have fail-safe systems, but had no idea what to do when those fail-safe systems broke down. Now, I announced this week that Bob Graham and Bill Riley, two respected individuals who have experience both on the environmental side as well as in the energy sector, are going to be examining over the next 6 months what went wrong, but more important, forward-looking, how do we, in fact, increase domestic oil production without seeing the kinds of disasters that we are all witnessing on television day in, day out. I think Governor Jindal, a number of the parish presidents expressed concern about the immediate economic impact, and what I said to them is the same thing I said to Graham and Riley, which is if they can front load some of the analysis of what went wrong and how you would solve what has happened and what can happen, and you can do that more quickly than 6 months, then let me know. Don't hold the results of your review for 6 months and then tell me. Tell me when you find out. But what I told the folks in this room was I'm not going to cut corners on it, and I'm not going to press them to move faster than it would take to do an accurate, independent job based on sound science, because I do not want to see this thing repeated again. And the American people don't, and I promise you the people of the Gulf don't want to see it either. And as difficult as it may be, it's important for us to do this right, because if we don't do it right, then what you could end up saying is an even worse impact on the oil industry down here, which is so important to so many jobs. And I think everybody here emphasized, and I want to be clear, I didn't hear anybody here say that they want unsafe operations on these rigs, and they certainly don't want to see a repeat of this disaster. They did ask, can we do it faster? And what I said to them was the same thing that I said to Graham and Riley, which is, you do it as fast as it takes to do it right. All right? Thank you, everybody.
Everyone, let's go.
Want BP to pay that dividend, and you're calling on them not to.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
I want to make sure that they are paying the folks in Louisiana for the havoc that they wreaked. And the folks in Alabama and the folks in Florida, I don't want them nickel and diming people down here. I want them to abide by their obligations to their shareholders. I want them to abide by the obligations of people down here as well.